To introduce myself, my name is Ahmad Firas Hudi. You can call me Firas, and I am a lecturer at Sociology program in Universitas Negeri Jakarta. For today's session, I will be a moderator, and a colleague, Pak Adit at the back, also will help me for this session. And he is from Public Relation and Digital Communication program. Before I start, I would like to read the resume of Professor Riela Provi Drianda. She is an associate professor at the Tokyo City University, as well as head of the Urban Culture Lab, Faculty of Urban Life Studies. She was graduated from Ph.D. in Spatial Planning from Chiba University, Japan, and also Landscape Planning Management from the same university. And she graduated from Urban Planning Program from Bandung Institute of Technology, or ITB. She, before with Tokyo City University, she was associate professor of social sciences at Waseda University, and also assistant professor, and also working at child care leave. She published a journal at Tourism and Hospitality with title Branding Soul, Multi-Celebrity Participation in Destination Branding. Also in Journal of Heritage Tourism, Rediscovering on Rose, Expanding Historical Narratives for Tourism. Professor Riela also an awardee for High Readership Recognition, International Development Planning Review, awardee for Study Abroad Operation Grant at Waseda University, and Minto Urban Study Grant awardee. I myself also study urban issue for the last 10 years. And I would like to begin now the session. And for Professor Riela, the floor and time is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So does it mean that I should be the one who shares the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Can you share your screen?
Yes, please wait for a second. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay,
Yes.
is that?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Bapak Firas, for the opportunity. So hello everyone. My name is Riela Drianda, and I'm from Tokyo City University. I hope that my voice is clear enough. And today I'll be speaking about like how AI and digitalization are transforming Japanese teas. So it is truly an honor to be here with you today. I hope this lecture will offer some useful insights and also encourage like further discussions. So like the organizer kindly requested me to share some thoughts on smart cities, particularly on how we can navigate the transformative impacts of AI and digitalizations in building a more resilient global society. But before entering that discussions, however, I believe it is important for us to look back. Like we need to ask like what happened, what has happened, where were we before, and like where are we now, and where are we trying to go. So when I was teaching at my former university, I had this course called Urban Living, where we discussed the transformations of cities and communities. And one point that often emerged from like our class discussions was that history is frequently overlooked. Even though it helped us to understand what problems like we are trying to address, it also allows us to ask whether our current solutions truly respond to the roots of the problems, or let's say like whether they only addressed like the surface to make things like appear more advanced or attractive. So with that in mind, let me continue with the this is like the content of today's presentation. So I'll begin with a brief self-introduction, and after that I will talk about the transformations of Japanese teas from the 1960s onward. And finally, I will try to share some reflections that I hope can stimulate discussions from the floor. So without further ado, let me begin my lecture. Well, this is like I'm just going to briefly introduce about myself, even though like Papa Firas already introduced about me a bit. So I earned like my bachelor degree from ITB, where I studied regional city planning. And my interest in this field actually developed strongly during this time, and it later encouraged me to pursue my postgrad after gaining some short-term professional experience at Babanas. And I'm currently working at Tokyo State University, where I'm managing the Urban Culture Laboratory. So you are very welcome to visit like my laboratory, or if you want to know more about that, you can visit like my website if you have time. As it also like provides like further informations about my research activities and like laboratory projects. So at present, like in this lab, we have like about 15 undergraduate members, and all of whom are Japanese students conducted research on like various topics related to urban culture and creativity. And their current like research interest include like kawaii culture, like you can see here, wait, like this, like the kawaii culture, and then also like heritage tourism here, and also like culture trends in cities, including like the production of some cultural stuff. And also we welcome like short-term visits from international students and scholars who are interested in developing like a more concrete academic and creative outputs. For example, like one of our intern visitors last year produced this leaflet about halal knowledge in Japan. And if you're considering applying for like a max scholarship next year, maybe this year the deadline already passed, you may also consider my laboratory as a potential host after securing the necessary acceptance, of course. All right, so from this point, like I will talk about the transformations of Japanese teas. So like for this lecture, I have chosen to begin with Japanese teas after the 1960s. So I'm not really sure like how many of you have been to Japan, but let me just like quickly introduce you to what happened before 2020s. And of course, like many Japanese cities had already undergone like significant development before this period. Like for example, like some parts of Tokyo had already become like quite developed during the Meiji period. So Meiji was before Taisei period, and like during the Taisho period, like the process further accelerated. But actually, like Tokyo also experienced like some major destructions because of the earthquake in 1923, and also like the World War II. So you can imagine that many parts of like Tokyo were burned and like destroyed. So therefore, like during the 1950s, like the city entered like a period of reconstruction, while other Japanese cities also gradually became like more urbanized. And like the 1960s actually marked a period when Japan's economy became like relatively more stable. And the government aimed to provide like more livable urban environments for the growing populations. Do you know why? Maybe Bapak Firas can guess it. Like the reason why the government suddenly wanted to provide like more housing to the people.
Because people increase.
Yeah, but it's actually related to our independence itself because like they had to host the return of Japanese soldiers from abroad. So because like the country entered like a more peaceful period, so many people began to start families, right? Which created like a stronger need for urban for housing like near the urban centers. So the government, in response to this growing demand, like promoted large-scale housing development. And this is like one example. Like Japanese people call this as danchi. Maybe in Indonesia we call this as like rumah susun. And this actually became like one of the major features of like the Japan's post-war urban landscape. And this was the era that we call, like Japan experienced the rise of standardized mass housing. So actually, like this, Danji followed the neighborhood unit concept, like to promote a new way of living. So basically, like residents were expected to access like various facilities, like such as schools, playground, shops, public spaces, so probably similar to our rumah susun, within walking distance. And it was not only housing project though, like it actually attempted to create like a more organized and livable community environment. And the early design of this danchi paid really careful attention to the residents' quality of life because it was, like crowded before. So factors such as like the access to sunlight, air circulation, what else like open space and the placement of the buildings including like the windows they were considered in the planning process. So even today, I mean, like if we try to compare like danchi layout with many contemporary apartment buildings in Tokyo, this danchi still provide like better sunlight, better ventilation, and like more spacious shared facilities. And these danji complexes are still in use today and quite popular among the international students in Japan because they're very affordable. I mean, like they're very cheap, and like which actually shows how carefully the original design was planned and implemented. And of course, like due to the age of this building, some parts have deteriorated and required, like maintenance or like renovations, but they still remain livable. And next is, I would like to introduce this one. So during this period, actually, Japanese households also experienced like a growing social pressure to own the so-called three sacred treasures. So they have the term here, like Sanshi no Jingi, was originally borrowed from Japan's imperial tradition. So Sansu no Jingi, also known as Mikusa no Kamudakara, refers to the imperial regalia of Japan. So like the sword, the mirror, and also like the jewel. So these three objects are traditionally associated with important, like virtues such as a valor, like wisdom and benevolence. However, in the context of these ordinary post-war households, like the meaning of these three sacred treasures changed. Like it came to refer to these three modern household appliances, like TV, washing machines, and also like the refrigerator. It's quite interesting to think about this because owning these items was, like not only about, oh, we're going to have like a more convenient life, but it also became like a sign of like modern living, economic stability, and respectable social status among the Japanese people. So let me just go to the next one. As you can see in these pictures, like by the 1960s, like Japanese cities already had like a several like a tall buildings and relatively like well developed like road infrastructure. They have like cars there, and train stations were also fully operating. Although tickets were still checked manually here, as you can see here, by the station staff. And I think like ticketing machines had already, I think had begun to appear during this period, but sometimes like the buttons and like mechanism were still somehow manually operated. I think like those who grew up in Indonesia, maybe like some of the professors here who grew up in the 1990s may be able to imagine, like this scene quite easily. So at that time, like people still had to go to the counter to purchase a ticket, and staff members would check the ticket at the gate, like to make sure that only passengers with valid tickets could enter the platform. And so, like during this period, like people in Japan also began to live more commonly in vertical housing, like danchi. So it had become like a part of like a new urban lifestyle, and apartment living was also becoming more familiar for many people. And as you can see here, that in 1960s, like the inner city areas were already busy, and the hustle and bustle of urban life had become like part of everyday experience for many city residents. Let's go to the next one. And the advancements of urban transportation was also clearly visible during this period. So imagine that this is like 1960s. So one of the most important developments was the completion and launch of Japan's first what do you call that, high-speed rail service, like the Shinkansen. So this term, like Shinkansen, literally means like new main line. So in English, however, like they translated Shinkansen as bullet train. So this was a name associated with the earlier proposal in 1938. So they called this train as Dangan, so means like a bullet train. So instead of using like the new main line, so they called Shinkansen in English as a bullet train. And the train actually began its operation in 1964. So connecting Tokyo to Osaka, you can see this is like Tokyo to Osaka through like the Tokaido like Shinkansen line. And at the time, like many express trains operated between Tokyo and Osaka, but still, they created this Shinkansen to respond to Japan's increasing demand for mobility, like during this period of like rapid economic growth. So its completion in time for the 1964 Tokyo Olympics also allowed Japan to present itself internationally as a country of like modern infrastructure, and like country with such technological innovation. So I mean, like, let's just remember that this is in 1960s. So Japan also continued to strengthen its international image through the successful hosting of the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. So Tokyo became like the first city in Asia to host this Olympic Games, which made the event like historically significant. And until then, actually, the Olympics had mainly been associated with Western hosties. So Tokyo selections and successful like hosting, like really carried such strong symbolic meaning. And for Japan, like the 1960s Olympics became an opportunity to somehow present itself as like a modern and capable nation in Asia. So like with urban infrastructure that met the global standard, so they created like many stadiums and also like parks to host like the events. And it also positioned Japan as an, emerging leader in Asia during the post-war period. And probably some of you know that during this period, Korea, the South Korea, I mean, like they were still struggling and recovering their economy. And so, like during the same period, I'm not sure whether like the young students knows about this song, but I guess like Bapa Firas and some professors there maybe are familiar with this song, probably. But like this is quite interesting because like during this period, the Japanese popular culture also began to gain like a wider international recognition. So one example here that I give is the rising popularity of Kyu Sakamoto, whose song like Ue o Muite Aruko. Yeah, that's like the original title. Became like widely known beyond Japan. And actually, in 1963, the song reached like number one on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100. So making like him the first Asian recording artist to achieve this milestone. And actually, like one possible factor behind the song's success in the United States was his exposure to American audience in Japan. So we discovered this through like YouTube comments that like some U.S. military personnel stationed in Japan recalled, like seeing him perform at Tachikawa Air Base in 1963. So it was quite interesting before the song became widely known around the world. So one such recollections describe how, like the audience felt that the song had the potential actually to become like a major hit, even though, like during that time, like many listeners, they didn't understand the lyrics at all. So this kind of encounters suggest that song's popularity was not only shaped by formal music, like distribution, but also by the cross-cultural like contact in post-war Japan. And we can say that this American military bases, because Japan, even now, they have like quite few military bases here. So we believe that this may help introduce Japanese popular music to foreign listeners before it reaches like a wider international market. And although the song was performed in Japanese, it was released internationally under the title Sukiyaki, which made it more familiar probably to the English speaking audiences. And I think there are many covers of this song that you can just like search in YouTube. And also here I want to introduce this one, which is quite interesting as well, because in 1960s, Japanese cities were also beginning to see these kind of like new machines that provided this ready-to-drink beverages on the streets. And one important example was the introduction of this Coca-Cola vending machines in Japan. So these machines were developed in collaborations with Mitsubishi, and it became like a part of the changing urban landscape. And during the first year of installations, which I mean, like reading this, I found that this is really remarkable. Around like 880 Coca-Cola vending machines were reportedly operating across Japan. And this is, like in 1960s, right? Again, I would like to emphasize the year. So this development shows how everyday urban life was gradually becoming like more convenient and automated. So like people no longer needed to enter a shop to purchase a drink. Instead, like beverages could be accessed directly from machines placed in the public spaces. Right. And next here, I would like to introduce this notable thing during the 1960s. So actually, like one of my research topics is related to the prehistoric sites in Japan. And like I discovered that during this year, like there was this growing strength of community-based movements in Japan. And this example can be found in Chiba City, where like local residents work to preserve like a prehistoric site that was under threat from modern urban development. So like the site itself, as you can see here, it contained like cell mounds and other archaeological remains from Japan's early prehistoric area known as the Jomon period. And since the discovered area was really, like huge, local citizens raised like their voices here, like and advocated for its preservation. So this is in front of Chiba Station. And their efforts actually, like encourage like the city to recognize the site as an important part of its local identity. So today, like this site remains like preserved and continues to be visited by local residents, especially during the summer holidays. And now let's move to 1970s. So like during this period, like danchy living also, it began to receive like strong criticism from the residents, because back then it was once represented the modern housing, right, and like a new urban lifestyle. And many residents and observers pointed out that the units were actually very small. I mean, like it probably could accommodate 2 or 3 like family members, but when they had like more children, it was quite compact. It was like too small, and the available facilities were not always sufficient for like their everyday family life. So several transformations were introduced, like after receiving this kind of like critics, some critics. So like one important change was the wider use of like the layout, like they used the LDK, which combined the living room, the dining area, and like the kitchen into like more, what do you call it, like functional domestic space. And this new layout provided families with more, like open and like flexible area for daily activities. And some Denji units also introduced the two-story designs within a single like unit, like allowing households with more family members to live more comfortably. So you can imagine like what is it like kind of the mini house inside the public housing unit. So these changes show how housing design gradually responded to the changing needs and expectations of urban families. And at the same time, this kind of like the vertical housing also became like more available. So apartment buildings known as mansion, like they call this type of like building as mansions or maybe condo in English. So they began to spread among these middle income households, and it reflected like the diversifications of urban housing in Japan as more people sought housing options that match their lifestyle more, including their income and also like family structure. And here like another change was the growing visibility of like the creativity in Japanese teas. So during this period, they had like this kind of like iconic architectural project, like reflecting the new ideas about urban living, technology, and design. And one of the well-known examples was this Nakagin Capsule Tower in Ginza district. So the building became like one of the most famous examples of this metabolist architecture in Japan. So it was kind of like the modular mixed-use building composed of like this kind of like small unit, and it's designed to function as an apartment, or you can just like change it into a studio space. Well, in principle, like several units here could also be connected to accommodate like a family. Maybe this reminded you to what do you call it, that one, the like the Dragon's Ball capsule. And yeah, of course, this kind of tower represented like an experimental visions of urban life where architecture responded to this kind of like the mobility and individual lifestyle. But however, in the later years, like the building faced some serious challenges, like the maintenance and some structural limitations. So in 2020, unfortunately, the entire structure was demolished. And also around this period, 1970s, again, I would like to highlight, to underline the year. Japanese cities also began to, like see the emergence of like monorail services. And this is one of the examples, which is the Shonan monorail. So it was the first public transportation system in Japan to use this kind of the suspended monorail technique. And they opened this one, I guess, in 1970, like 1970, sorry, like connecting an area known as Ofuna and Nishikamakura. So they only had like five stations back then, and now I guess that it was called like monorail in the sky. And I mean, like if you have a chance to visit Kamakura, you may take this monorail and then take about like a 14 to 15 minutes maybe to travel the full route. And next, so this is really interesting, like in 1970s, we can call this era as the period when innovation became very visibly in Japan, all across Japanese cities. And one important moment was the Osaka Expo in 1970. where many new technologies and experimental ideas were introduced to the public through like different pavilions and displays. So maybe like some of these ideas, may have looked like quite unrealistic at that time. Like perhaps, people reacted in the same way, like many of us react today when we hear, let's say like people talking about flying cars or like fully automated like urban life. So we may think that can this really become like part of our everyday life? And one interesting example here, maybe you can guess it. It was the human washing machine, the display at the expo. And for people in the 1970s, like, even having a proper shower room with hot water was already seen as comfortable and modern, right? So the idea that someone could simply enter a machine and then have their body washed automatically must have felt very futuristic. However, even now, I'm not sure like how many of us actually use this kind of like machine. I guess that it has not really become part of our daily reality, right? Perhaps like some of us still enjoy, the feeling or like standing under the shower, like taking their time, and I'm not sure, like probably even using this kind of like deeper to wash themselves because it feels like more personal and relaxing. And another invention was this experiment with the double-decker elevator, and it can be found at the Osaka Obayashi office. And this one also, like you can see like small devices also developed quite rapidly. Like buttons were no longer like manual or mechanical as before, and their design became like a softer, easier to use, and well, I mean like during this time, like more like modern in appearance. So this is like the microwave. Yeah, this is microwave. And vending machines also changed significantly during this time. I mean, if you compare it with the 1960s one, so it became like more modern in a way, and they gradually become like more familiar in everyday urban spaces. And in terms of like preservation efforts, like we actually have already seen how community movement in 1960s, right, become like a stronger in Chiba. But another case in Kamakura also helped lay the foundation for cultural landscape preservation in Japan's historical areas. So this is in Kamakura. The name of the shrine is Surugaoka Hachimangu, and it had long been regarded as like one of the central shrines in Kamakura area. And the building itself was already protected actually, but the residents, they were worried about this one, the forested hill behind it. So for these people, like this green backdrop was part of the shrine's atmosphere. So if the hill had been replaced by housing, you can imagine housing, tall buildings here. So the view and the feeling of the shrine would have changed completely, right? So because of this concern, the local residents, cultural, like some figures and scholars, they began to oppose the development plan. So they collected like this public support, like there is awareness and work to protect the hills. So we are not talking about this building, but like the forested hills behind the shrine, okay? And this actually became one of the early examples of citizen-led landscape protection in Japan. And I saw like here in Kyoto, maybe some of you have been to Kyoto and then probably, took some pictures in this area. So this Higashiyama area now is really popular among the tourists, but unfortunately, maybe they are not aware about like its past history. So back then, even in the 1970s, like the tourism grew, redevelopment continued. So residents, they became concerned, even now, that the traditional streetscape would slowly disappear. So basically, they pay closer attention to this like traditional urban streetscapes, or like we call this as machinami. And the city in 1972 like introduced the visual townscape preservation ordinance to make sure that these historical neighborhoods would be protected, like to control the building heights and also like maintain the character of the selected areas. And so we can see that also this one, like this is Takamatsuzuka Kofun in Asuka village in Nara. So in 1972, like these wall paintings were discovered inside the tomb. Like it like as you can see here, like depicting the human figures, some guardian animals. And the discovery actually drew like national attentions because it was like like the first known case of these full color two murals like found in Japan. So it really brought like a new conservation challenges. So the murals were, like visually very striking, but they were very fragile. So once like the tomb was opened, so changes in air, humidity, temperature created risk of deterioration. So basically, like during this period, like the Japanese government, they tried to include, like historical landscapes, traditional streetscapes, and also archaeological sites whose survival depended on like specialized conservation techniques. Okay, so next we go to the 1980s. So probably I need to have like more time to explain about this transformation. And we enter this 1980s period often remembered in Japan and abroad as like the bubble economy era for Japanese people. So for like many older Japanese, like this period, like remains kind of associated with prosperity, like a sense that the future was, what do you call that, expanding. And for many young people today, like the 1980s appear almost unreal for many of them. If you look into the SNS of like many young people in Japan, like on the social media, they couldn't imagine how people, of the same age, like in the 1980s, during this bubble period, could afford to take taxi home every day and travel abroad for like more than once a year and enjoy like a level of consumption. So basically they went to party every night. That feels really difficult, like these days. So this contrast is really important because Japan may now feel like relatively affordable for many foreign visitors. So many of my colleagues also, whenever they visit Japan, they say that, well, Japan is so cheap now. Maybe it's the same when our Malaysian fellows visited Indonesia now, like Indonesia is really cheap. So it's the same situation in Japan these days. Many local residents feel that the everyday living costs have become really heavy. And so like this memory of the bubble period, like therefore like carries such both nostalgia and frustration in a way. It reminds people of a time when, like youth, work, and consumption seem to over like wide possibilities. And here also in 1980s, it was the period when they produced many new urban landmarks, like kind of this spiral buildings. And also this one, like lifestyle also changed as money circulated like more easily among the young people. Like the new forms of consumptions became part of their everyday, what do you call it, exploration. So for example, like you saw before, like the lavish like Western style weddings became like increasingly popular. Some couples who married during the 1980s also had this both like international wedding and like Japanese style wedding. Even my homestay mother, who married during this period, also she mentions that she traveled to Canada for her honeymoon. So her story actually indicated how international travel, even to North America or Europe, became really accessible for some middle class households. So I would like to highlight this one, the middle class household during the bubble period. And this one also because like the bubble economy produced like a stronger culture of consumption. Like young people spend more on fashions like music, entertainment, travel, and yeah, so on. And this change was really visible in the city. Like major urban areas began to produce like new culture hubs, like where this kind of the lifestyles, subculture, and popular culture could be seen more clearly. And Daikanyama was part of the shift. So this is located very close to Shibuya area. It is actually like located in between Shibuya and Ebisu, and it developed like its own reputation for like high-end cafes, like boutiques, like these design-oriented shops, And I guess that here you can see that how Daikanyama was introduced in local magazines through like shops and places worth visiting. So this city was, like portrayed not only as a place to live, but also a place to browse, consume, meet friends, and perform their lifestyle identity. And also, like during this same period, we saw a stronger like presence of entertainers, other groups, like for example, SMAP. I'm not sure whether you guys knows about this, but like SMAP is quite a useful example because in later decades they became like one of the most influential groups in Japanese entertainment. And next here, so I guess like maybe some professors, when you look into this kind of like a device, it does ring a bell, because like in 1980s, like this kind of the portable and personal electronic device had become like increasingly embedded in people's everyday life. And I think like today students may no longer keep this device at home, but like for us who grew up in the 1990s, you even to see like the color, the forms, the sounds, like like they remain really familiar. For example, like the refrigerator, the PC, Walkmans, like Atari consoles, like Game Boys, like were part of the material culture of the late 20th century childhood, right? And they actually shaped like the domestic routines and also like what do you call that? Well, like a personal forms of entertainment. So people watch like this TV in their living room before they had to go to the neighbor's house to watch, like some series. But then they can enjoy it in at their home. And also like people began to carry like this one Walkman, like carry music beyond the private space of the house. So the Walkman, I think, is especially useful to understand the shift. It made like music portable and personal, allowing like people to create like a private listening space while moving through the city. And it also carried this kind of the new culture image, like it looked modern, youthful, and stylish. And yeah, I have to speed up. So at the same time, like this, yeah. So the in the 90s, also like the culture infrastructure began to receive like greater attention from the government. So culture policy was not limited only to the heritage preservation or like the protections of traditional arts, but also linked to the creation of spaces where culture could be performed, like displayed, and also like experienced by the public. So they provided like spaces, because actually in the 1970s like many public cultural halls were also built, but they did not always have this kind of the capacity or like specialist functions. So during the 1980s, like this kind of the cultural facilities begin to appear, like this National Noh Theater, Bunraku Theater, and also like Matsumoto Harmony Hall. Okay, so these are the some several representative photos from the 1980s. So you can see here that the train stations still look quite manual, digital signals at all, and much of the information is dependent on the printed boards, station announcement, and like the staff guidance. And the cityscape, if you look here, may be well, kind of somewhat familiar to us today, but just if you look at the cars, so maybe the atmosphere was a bit different. And there were like, of course, like fewer digital screens, like electronic displays, and so on. Like, well, people sat in front in the parks or like open spaces, and they opened like Disneyland in 1980s. Again, I mentioned the year. Imagine that the big theme park was opened in 1980s. And now I think we move to the let's move to the 1990s, when Japanese urban mobility became like increasingly computerized. What time is it now? Okay. So train stations somehow still relied heavily on the printed signs and magnetic tickets, but the idea of like like some smoother or like machine like readable, eventually contactless travel was already developing, just the idea. Okay. And they started to think about like making this kind of like card. So maybe if you travel to Japan now, you can what is it, like use the server, you can just get the digital one. So the name of Suica certainly stands for this super urban intelligent card. So it reflected like a new directions in, urban mobility. But yeah, I mean, like before Suica become like a part of Japanese people. This is in Tokyo anyway. Tokyo's people's everyday life. So they still use these magnetic tickets and inserted them into the automatic gate. So maybe I think this is quite familiar to you guys. So these gates already changed, the experience, right, of moving through stations. So if you still remember, like the image from the 1960s, like there was a staff checking every ticket, but here, like you can see that there were no staff. Then they don't have to, sorry, they didn't have to check the every ticket by hand, and passenger flow became like more organized through like the machine. But you can still hear like some announcements were still manual. But like in the late 1990s, like the environments began to like more computerized. You can see here like this digital display appeared alongside the printed boards, and the new Shinkansen model actually gave like railway mobility a more modern image. Okay, next is this one. Like in 1990s, actually Japan also experienced a boom in theme parks and entertainment destinations. So after the success of Tokyo Disneyland in 1980s, so other operators, local operators in Japan began to develop their own like theme research spaces that combine like a fantasy, character culture, history, and so on. And maybe some of you knows about Hello Kitty. So Sandiopuro line is one of the examples. So it was opened in the Tama area on what is it like? It features like characters such as Hello Kitty, Keropi. I'm not sure whether you guys knows about this, but it was quite. I mean, like they were quite highly popular among like children during the 1990s. And also here one is the Nagasaki theme park inspired by the Dutch urban scenery and the historical relationship between Nagasaki and the Netherlands. This one is the Ninja is a Kingdom. So they kind of like harness the theme of like ninja culture and historical storytelling as the main attractions. Okay, next is this one. So maybe some of you have seen this before. I guess like during the 1990s, I mean like everyday life became like increasingly personalized and connected through like portable digital devices. So in Japan, like this kind of the pagers, like mobile phones, like electronic, like organizers, like digital cameras, and even handycams became part of the changing urban lifestyle. So we can say that this device actually altered how people contacted one another to manage their daily schedules and recorded like ordinary experience. And this circulations of this device was not limited, was not confined to Japan only, because like I guess they moved widely across Asia and became like a familiar objects in many households, including in Indonesia. So I remember that in the 1990s, like these memories of the early mobile phones, what is it like I still remember that they were pretty huge. Like, of course, like they were already portable, but still large and heavy. They could be carried around, but it felt like really oversized in a way. And also, like pagers changed the everyday communication. So before, like you guys now probably using WhatsApp and some I don't know like other texting like applications. But before this mobile messaging became like common, like pagers allowed people to receive like short messages and coordinate their daily activities. So I still remember using this when I was in Indonesia to contact my father, for example, when I asked him to kind of like pick me up. So this kind of a small device created this new channel of communications between children and parents outside the home. And also like how handycams and digital cameras changed the family documentations. So I think that interesting. I think this is interesting because they shape like how families stored memories, right? Like turning their everyday life into images, like videos and portable records. And so like I think like many of us who grew in the 1990s remember this device not as this kind of the emerging technologies, but more like an objects that we touch personally, we carry it, we borrow it, and we use in our daily life. And I think I'm going to be really quick. So this is also like the youth street culture becoming like more intense and colorful. All right. So, oops, sorry. Let me just stop sharing this. Hmm. Just a moment. Okay. Wait, I think my connection is not strong. Just a moment. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay. So this one also like I mean like the examples that I showed you probably represented like Tokyo and some like major metropolitan areas, but the situation was somehow like a little bit different in like like regional cities. For example, Hiroshima, like they like it didn't experience the same intensify of redevelopment seen in Tokyo. So like the cityscape appeared a little bit calmer and like more spacious in a way, with like this slower what do you call that one, like a rhythm of urban life. So of course this contrasted with like Tokyo's dense and vibrant and highly commercial environment, right? And this actually difference remind us that urban transformation in Japan did not happen evenly across all cities. So of course, like from the perspective of the outsiders, like Tokyo often um, represented as the most accelerated image of like your chains, advance, and so on. While regional cities in Japan actually they followed like a different speeds, like shaped by the local economies, population size, and their everyday urban routines. So now we entered the 2000s, like a period where the pace of urban transformations became increasingly visible. And I guess, yeah, I think this is related to what we're going to talk after this. So we saw like the advancement in the digital systems, new transport services, like large-scale development, redevelopment, sorry, and changing, the consumer spaces in Japan. So this was also the period when I first came to Japan. My impression at that time was really strong. Like I was really struck by how many people relied on public transportation and how closely connected different cities, like were. For example, like traveling from Chiba to Tokyo or even from Chiba to Yokohama could be done quite easily by train. Well, in Indonesia back then, it was quite challenging. So in Japan, like the routes were carefully organized. The information was clear. So if you see this one, so you know where to go. I mean, like if you can read some Japanese, but eventually they also provided, like some kind of the Latin, like what you call it, like characters to support like the foreign travelers as well. And I guess that yeah. So also they introduced the Suica cards. If you remember the super urban intelligent cards, they were finally introduced in the early 2000s, like to help commuting much easier in a way. So passengers they no longer needed to buy this paper tickets for every trip or like like worry about losing weekly or monthly tickets. So I still experience that anyway, like purchase like this kind of the paper tickets from the counter and to make sure that I would not lose the ticket. So by simply inserting Suica or like similar cards at the automatic gate, like we could move like through stations like more like smoothly. And this kind of like the automatic ticket gates, the digital displays and like online route information, somehow changed the way we navigated the city. So like transfers became easier to understand for some people. If I mean like if you go to Shinjuku, they're still like really, really complicated. And travel time somehow became easier to estimate and stations gradually felt more organized for both regular commuters and visitors. And also like Shinkansen services, so we call this like Dr. Yellow. They also continue to develop like during this period, like newer models over like a faster, like more comfortable travel, and they had become like part of the everyday intercity mobility. And also next, I need to speed up. Mobile phones became very more common in everyday life. Like providers such as like NTT, Docomo, or AU expanded their services, including like discount plans for students and younger people with limited income. So mobile phones were no longer used only for calling, and sending messages. You see some changing in culture here. They also became the personal objects. If you see, they put a lot of like straps. They decorated phones with kind of the charms and other accessories. So phone became part of like personal style, like carried in the hand, attached to bags, and displayed in public space as a part of like the, like urbanized identity. And this was especially visible among the young people. And also like the ownership of this desktop computer, laptops also increased, especially among students. And for foreigners living in Japan, so I still remember that I had to buy this kind of the electronic dictionaries because they were especially useful. So back then there were no this kind of the translation apps. So you can imagine how hard it was to live in 2000s in Japan, right? Because like we had to use our electronic dictionaries to kind of convey the messages to the Japanese people because they couldn't understand English, like we couldn't understand Japanese, so it was really hard time for many of us. And also, yeah, so vending machine also like developed like significantly during this period. So they were no longer, like machines to sell like drinks or foods, but some began to include, these emergency functions like storing supplies for earthquakes, disasters, and payment system also changed. So as the machines gradually began to accept like IC cards, like this kind of Suica, and other forms of digital payment. So every day, like urban equipment became like more connected to our convenience, like mobility, and even like other functions like disaster preparedness. And okay, so another important development was the creation of these new leisure destinations. So before you saw that Japan established the various numbers theme parks, but in this time, like the landscape was further reshaped by the opening of these two major parks, like the this one following the success of Tokyo Disneyland. Probably some of you have visited this theme park. So Disney actually expanded, its presence in Japan through the opening of this Disney Sea. Like the theme park was built around this oceanic landscape theme, port-inspired settings, and so on. And around the same period, like Universal Studios in Japan also opened as like, what do you call that one? Like a major international entertainment destinations, like bringing like those American origin like media franchise into Japanese urban leisure market. So it was no longer dominated by the like local entertainment, but also you can see how this investment gradually entered Japan. And next is 2010s. So I guess that maybe some of you have heard about this. So the stability of Japan was somehow shaken in 2011 because of this, what do you call it? Like the Great East Japan, Great East Japan earthquake, like followed by this devastating like tsunami that struck, like the coastal areas of the Tohoku region. Like it brought really like severe damage to many communities, particularly in Miyagi Prefecture here. And disaster was further like compounded by the accidents of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Maybe some of you have heard about this, where the radioactive like leakage generated this kind of the widespread concern over environmental safety, food security, and the long-term effects of contamination. So you can imagine that back then, agriculture and marine products from, like Fukushima, Miyagi, for example, like fruits, vegetables, and seafood were initially avoided by consumers in other prefectures because, they they were afraid of the radiation exposure. So as a result, like many producers, they face serious like economic pressure and were often forced to lower the prices in order to sell their products outside the prefecture. So sometimes they just like sell it for a half of the price. And even though like the government introduced like various like measures to support the farmers and restores, you know, like their the consumers' confidence, but the what is it like it was not always received with the full trust. So some members, some of us, some you know remain like skeptical about like believing whether these official informations about the radiation levels may have been controlled in order to prevent like public panic. And at the same time, like in these heavily affected areas, like Miyagi Prefecture, for example, like numerous like volunteers visited the what is it like the region to assist with recovery efforts, and also they built like shelters and support facilities. So for the children who had lost their parents, as well as like adults who had you know experienced like a similar loss. So various initiatives were introduced, including like the temporary play program for children, community activities, and local recovery movements to help residents rebuild their life once again. And also like here in this period, like Japan experienced another attractive Genesis by 4:30, so we have like enough time for the discussion. Japan also experienced like another milestone, which was the opening of Tokyo Skytree. So it was considered like a new vertical landmark that stood contrast to the older presence of Tokyo Tower. And its completion actually like created new opportunities for the surrounding area, particularly, you know, like through the growth of commercial districts, you know, increased like visitor flows, like rising land and rental values. And also like another Shinkansen model was being introduced. And so here, like in central Tokyo, like the redevelopment became an increasingly important topic among government actors and private developers, because you know, like Tokyo, it had to compete with other cities such as Shanghai or like a Seoul. So to kind of, you know, like to seek this kind of the what you call it, like the renewed global urban image. So large-scale regeneration projects began to transform the inner city landscape here, as you can see. So areas once characterized by this kind of the older, low-rise buildings gradually gave way to these high-rise complexes, office towers, and this kind of the mixed-use developments. So like major developers, for example, like in this case is Mori Building, turned their attentions to several historically significant inner city districts like Toranomon area. So the name of Toranomon itself literally means the Tiger Gate. So it was like one of the gates around this Edo castle. So they tried to what do you call that one? Like transform this area into a bit of the like global scale business hub. And during this period, like the idea of society 5.0 also began to gain like some policy prominence in Japan. So the former prime minister, the late Shinzo Abe, actually proposed this new stage of like social development after the information society that I explained before. So people started to use, you know, like internet and personal device. But then like the concept of Society 5.0 actually responded to the limitations of the earlier digital era, when the IoT, the online information systems, and open data had already become part of the life, but this digital connectivity was considered insufficient for solving deeper, you know, like social problems. So therefore, like they called for like another actions to enable this kind of the closer integrations between the cyberspace and the physical space. So its main ambition was to use digital technologies, AI, big data, robotics to address like social challenges such as like aging, the population, disaster management, also access to services, and also like in other, I think in other countries as well. like similar policy directions also appeared. For example, in South Korea, they introduced this Smart Korea 5.0. Singapore also it has its own like Smart Nation initiative. Malaysia also proposed like Malaysia 5.0. And so, of course, like they were not identical to Japan's Society 5.0, but somehow they shared this kind of the comparable ambitions, like to connect digital transformations with national development, urban management, and social improvement. And here I would like to introduce you to the realizations of Sogochi concept, which may be translated as this convergent knowledge or like integrated knowledge. So the concept itself refers to the combination of knowledge from different academic, professionals, and social fields in order to respond to complex social problems. And it is often associated with the advanced technologies such as AI, big data, and so on. But of course, like technology cannot resolve like social issues. Like for example, like an aging society cannot be addressed simply by introducing robots, or disaster management cannot be, depend only on sensors and digital maps. Smart cities cannot be created through data platforms alone. So these challenges are shaped by human behavior, ethics, local culture, public policy, urban planning, and so on. So for this reason, the Japanese government thought that the collaborations between engineering, the humanities, and social science becomes essential. So engineers, they may design the technological systems, but like sociologists, like you guys probably you can be called yourself as sociologists, right? Urban planners, like historians, are needed to examine how those systems will be used, who will benefit from them, and who may be excluded. So Soguchi positions this Society 5.0 as a human-centered project where this innovation must be guided by social understanding and public responsibility. I think I have 6 minutes left. So an example of a housing project that challenged contemporary urban development threats is the Harumi flag in Tokyo. So this project was designed to provide like a high quality residential environment supported by this advanced energy infrastructure. So, like they try to use this hydrogen energy to support a smarter model of urban living. Okay, of course, it's going to be really expensive. And now let's enter the 2020s. Probably a topic that is more related to what we want to discuss today. So the smart city agenda developed significantly during this period, and we could say that this COVID-19 accelerated the digitalization, as you experienced that. Social restrictions made clear how strongly everyday life depended on technological systems, because we were connected by, let's say, like Wi-Fi, so we could do like remote work, online educations, delivery platforms, and even database like public health measures because of like the Internet of Things. And this experience like pushed many companies, like governments and research institutions, to accelerate innovations linked to the idea of a super smart society. Really difficult. So during the pandemics, like in Japan, robots were introduced in some high-end residential areas and medical-related settings to deliver medicines and also reduce this direct human contact. So like those experiments somehow, like showed the potential of robotic services in supporting urban residents, right? Especially like during periods of like restricted mobility. So they demonstrated how digital infrastructure could help cities to emergency situations. And during this period, like the Society 5.0 was no longer treated as an abstract idea. So after the Cabinet Office of Japan positioned it as like a national policy directions, so research funding and startup support related to its realization began to increase. So the concept like gradually moved from policy language into technological experiments, local projects, and applied research. So this is kind of like the image of the future society that they imagined, right? So here I would like to introduce you to kind of example of the future-oriented smart city concept in Susono City at the foothills of Mount Fuji. So like this project was initiated, of course, by Toyota, and it was planned as an experimental urban site where mobility, robotics, AI, energy systems, and everyday residential life could be tested within a real living environment. So I guess it's interesting if you have a time to look into their website, to their promotional videos, and these days like this is still developing as an experimental urban project. So I guess they already completed the first phase and moved toward like the operation, and they invited like the Toyota employees, like the family, researchers, related participants to become the first resident and users of the site. And also here, like the 2020s, we also witnessed the completion of the major inner city renewal projects, including Toranomon Hills that I introduced before. So like this project received this top platinum certifications in the neighborhood development category of the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design program. So a visit to the site actually offers a clear view how contemporary development in Tokyo is being designed around comfort, accessibility, climate responsive movement, and also like this area is highly integrated with the surrounding transport network, like from the nearest station. Like the pedestrians can move toward the complex through like sheltered routes that provide like protection from heat or like rain and wind. So of course, like the surface road like this remain available, but the project offers like this part, like what do you call that one? Like the alternative like routes during the harsh weather. So this design shows that inner city redevelopment is no longer focused on the building itself, but on the everyday, but also on the everyday experience of moving through the city. But like we visited the site like Toranomon Hills for a couple of times, and somehow like the parts of the concept remain difficult to realize in practice. Of course, like the idea was really cool in a way. For example, like they attempted to introduce like pockets of nature to restore like biodiversity within like this dense urban environment. But across like three site visits, we didn't observe visible aquatic life in the stream. The water appeared clean. The birds could be heard, of course, like we heard like some chirping birds, but the landscape gave the impression of being highly controlled. The space was visually attractive, but also it raised questions about whether such, like engineered greenery can support the kind of urban nature needed for long-term sustainability. Next is I have to speed up, sorry. So like the redevelopment project in Shibuya. So maybe if you have a chance to visit Shibuya, you will take pictures or videos in the Shibuya crossing, because it now became like it has become like a required destination, I guess, for many foreign travelers. But the current redevelopment of Shibuya extends beyond the crossing itself, so it aims to reorganize the district infrastructure, commercial functions, and also like the visual identity. And if you compare Shibuya with the previous landscape, like several changes become really visible. For example, like we have like more digital screens, like illuminated displays. They replace the older signboards, so giving like the vibe that the districts is more futuristic than before. Next is the emergence of robots in like urban mobility and services. So I guess in recent years, like robots have become like more visible in everyday life in Japan. So for example, in some hotels, like guests may encounter like robot receptionists, including those, like design. Maybe you have seen this somewhere on social media. So like those designed in the form of dinosaurs, like greeting the guests, and even like like guide them to how to get into their rooms and so on. And in other spaces, like information counters also have been replaced by service robots, or like this kind of the what do you call it, like the digital screens that assist like visitors with navigations. And also here, like the robots have appeared in the food service sector, in some fast food restaurants or like family restaurants, like the delivery robots are used to bring like meals to the customers. Because Japan experienced this labor shortage, so this process reflect the growing needs to maintain service quality despite like their shrinking workforce. And robot delivery experiments here also have been conducted by companies such as Rakuten. So actually, one major concern is accessibility in rural and isolated area, including like small islands where like the services and logistics are more difficult to maintain. So this kind of the delivery robots may support all the residents in areas with such limited transportations or like issues related to aging populations and fewer service workers. And again, here I would like to introduce that these recent years, like the self-checkout counters have become like increasingly common in convenience stores, like this one in fast food restaurants. So if you want to order ramen, you just need to use the device. And also like in the supermarkets, hotels, even like fashion retailers such as GU or Uniqlo. So basically, you just need to put your basket inside this machine, and then it will automatically, like calculate how much you need to pay. So this reflects like growing concern over like labor shortage, especially in the service industries, right? By introducing this kind of the self-payment systems, I guess like the stores can reduce pressure on staff while still allowing customers to pay through like both cash and cashless method. So I would like to highlight this one. Like the things that I like about Japan is the continued availability of multiple payment options. So of course, like digital payment has expanded, yet many stores still provide like cash payments and staff counters. So this is significant, because not all residents own smartphones, especially like the older people, and probably they cannot really use digital device. So we talk about the digital divide here, or maybe they are just not comfortable, relying entirely on cashless systems. So for example, like senior citizens, foreign residents, foreign visitors, children, and people who's, for example, as simple as running out of their batteries may need more conventional forms of payment and assistance. So after the rise of, give me like 5 minutes, the rise of Society 5.0, so scholars, policymakers, and inventors begin to discuss how the 2050, now they're heading to 2050 smart city, could respond to Japan's long-term urban challenges. For example, like population decline, aging society, there's kind of the labor shortage, shrinking regional services, and increasing costs of the maintaining public infrastructure. And even at the university level, the first year students are now exposed to this kind of the future-oriented urban agenda. However, like the way the concept is sometimes introduced can be problematic, in my opinion. So many discussions quickly turn to, to the same answer. Okay, robots can solve the labor shortage. AI can manage the data services. Data can improve the urban life. That's all the answers that we hear from the students. And this framing risks actually narrowing students' understanding of cities and society. It encourages them to see technology as an automatic solution without asking what kinds of social, ethical, environmental, and economical problems may be created by that technology. So that kind of like, I would call that as the technological optimism needs to be treated very carefully because of course like AI development and data center expansions also carry serious risks. So maybe you've heard like from the United States that there are some kind of the problems because like the data centers require like large amounts of electricity and water, and their environmental costs are often hidden, behind the language of innovations, right? Like in the United States, for example, like this kind of the rapid data center development has already raised concern over like electricity demand, local infrastructure pressures, and unequal access to energy resources. So like the residents, they had to sacrifice their life, their nights, just to make sure that the data center can operate like smoothly. So this will lead us to my questions in the discussions part. So I know that my time is not that much. So I would like to directly go to these questions. Because like in Japan, of course, like they've been pursuing the idea of a super smart society in order to address like various like problems, including the wicked ones. And it often presented as like visions that combined, the innovations with the knowledge from the humanities and social science. Yet one important question still appears and, to be missing from like many discussions. So like what kind of social environment is needed for people to live well, feel secure, raise family, and even remain in their communities, or like simply say like how to make them happy. Because this kind of questions does not always receive like sufficient attentions, in Japan, because it is less attractive than discussions about AI, robots, smart infrastructure, and digital platforms. Because I think like from our expertise, we shouldn't understand population decline just like something that can be addressed by technological advancement. So maybe like one possible answer is simpler and more structural, because like the reason why Japan experienced population decline is related to how hard it is these days for many young people to earn enough money to secure like stable employment and even to raise children under the current like social and economic conditions. So maybe you don't know about this, but for 20 years like salaries in Japan have remained stagnant while the cost of living continues to rise. So like housing, childcare, education, food, transportation, and daily expenses place increasing pressure on this young household. So how can they, like have kids, or they have that kind of the dream to raise a family on their own? And so sorry. So again, also this is, I guess like the central questions there remains unsolved here, because like if Japan's population continues to decline, who will use the smart services, purchase products, maintain infrastructure, or like support local economies and sustain urban life in the future? So I guess that society 5.0 should not be discussed only as a matter of like the technological advancement, but also it must confront, many social conditions that shape people's decisions about work, family, care, education, and everyday life. And this one, maybe, I'm not sure whether you have heard on social media, but in recent years, like Japan has begun to accept like more foreign workers in selected sectors to respond to, these shortages across the country, including from Indonesia. And this shift has become like necessary as the domestic workforce in Japan continue to decline, especially in the regional areas. But, the expansion of this foreign labor has not always been accompanied by sufficient multicultural awareness. So even though like Japan developed like many, let's say like equipments, many tools, but without this sufficient multicultural awareness, language support, or like community level preparation, it will be really challenging actually to make sure that the communications between the locals and also like the migrant communities can be achieved. Because like these days, like the tensions do not affect only newly migrant, but also like influence the life of us who have been, like living in Japan for many years as well. So like public anxiety toward migration has become like more visible, and such reactions actually reveal like a serious challenge for Japan's future, because they said the need for labor increasing. Okay, we'll replace them with like a like machine and so on. But then what about talking about this let's say like migrant issues, the multi communities within these super smart societies? So I guess that this kind of like debates have not really been introduced in the Japanese discourse. So I would like to close this lecture with one main reflection. So, well, without careful planning and critical social awareness, so future cities may become highly connected to machines and robotic services, while human-to-human connections become weaker. So a truly smart city, I believe, should not only manage like movement, energy, services, and data. So it also should protect like trust, care, coexistence, and the social relationship that allow our urban life to continue. So maybe that's all for me. Sorry for the long presentations. So can I give this floor back to Dr. to Bapak Firas? Thank you.
Okay, give applause to Professor Riela. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Riela, for a very comprehensive presentation. Now I would like to open Q&A and discussion for students who are in here and also in Zoom. If you have opinion or question, you're welcome. Yeah, one. Yeah, maybe another one if you have question. Mas Adit, can you, yeah, or Pak Indra, yeah. Yeah, please introduce yourself and the year you enroll as well and your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Mutiara Ashifa. I am from Public Relations and Digital Communication. So the question is, we all know that Japanese people are known for working hard culture. So, but now that AI and smart cities are starting to take over many jobs. So my question is, do you think this will finally give Japanese people the chance to live slower, like, you know, slow living culture that you mentioned before? Or will they just end up spending that free time consuming more digital content instead, like digital consumption? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maybe Prof. Riela can answer the question first.
Okay, so thank you very much, Mutiara, for the nice question. So it is actually like the questions that concerns all of us here, because as you know that the older generations, they really love to work, but the younger generations these days, they do not work as hard as the older generations. So even like the reasons why many factories, for example, or even like the daycare services recruited like the, you know, like people from Indonesia, for example, people from Vietnam, because like migrant workers are considered having like more ethics, like more hardworking, like a spirits than the young Japanese people. Because for example, like they come like to the what do you call it? Like for example, like the daycare service for the elderly, one time, and then they spend like couple hours with the, you know, like the patients, and after that they will quit. So this is getting intense, and I guess that's the reason why many, you know, like Japanese companies prefer to recruit migrant workers instead of the Japanese young people. And I don't think that with the AI adoptions, it will change the working culture here, because of course it's about the people. And I think it's unfair also to, you know, generalize, for example, like all the Japanese people are hard worker, or maybe they don't want to work at all, because again that even within Japan, like the culture in Kanto area and Kansai area is different. The culture in like the Okinawa region is also different. So people in Okinawa tend to live like slower, because they're basically living in the island, and the island culture is like slower than the, you know, like Tokyo's culture, right? So of course that I would say that it's not going to replace it, but slower living, that's actually hard questions to answer. Slower living is possible, but not in Tokyo. I guess it's possible in the regional areas, because they are practically dying these days. And like to introduce, for example, to force the young people to work harder will not give any attractiveness to the city. So if they want to work harder and earn a lot of money, they will need to go to Tokyo. So maybe that's the answer that I can give to you. Does it answer your questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maybe next question from the, okay, right side. Okay. Aldi, please. Yeah.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank the professor here for giving me the chance to speak, to ask my question. And okay, so I'll just get to the point. So I've written down the question here, and okay, And let me introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Aldi. You can just call me Aldi. You can just call me Aldi, and I'm from Sociology of 2024 of UNJ. And okay, the point is that, so as we all know from your presentation, that smart cities and automation cannot replace human labor in critical sectors like caregiving and infrastructure maintenance, and public resistance to immigration remains high, right? And the question here is that how exactly can Japan maintain the massive tax base and capital required to keep these advanced technological systems from becoming obsolete high-tech liabilities? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think you should bring these questions to the cabinet office instead of me, because this is actually like the concerns that most of us have these days. Because I guess like there've been like imbalance between like the development of this, research funds to the let's say like those doing the smart related cities research and those doing like the social and humanities. Probably like this is not only in Japan but also like all across the globe that we've been facing this kind of issue. So they've been like trying to address only like let's say like the advancements of the technology, for example, what kind of equipment, what kind of like like techniques that should be improved, but they forget to remember that we try to create this smart city for the people, right? Not for the machine. So if you just put this kind of a priority to the development of robotic tools, that kind of the automatic like services, who will use that? So I guess that's the questions that we've been always, asking to the government in Japan, even like the local government, because now they're really heading toward the smart city. But for who? That's the questions that we always try, to remind them that giving like such kind of this funding to like the social humanities research also is important as giving such, to secure the funds for the research related to the smart cities, engineering sectors, and so on. And as you can see here that I don't have any answer this time, because this is the existing problems that we are facing with the rising tensions among the, the local people toward the migrants in Japan, despite knowing that migrants actually contributed to the economy of Japan, including paying like pensions and also like taxes. But because like the narrative from the government is quite different, so they don't really acknowledge the foreigners as having such contributions to the development of Japan or like addressing the social challenges in Japan. It is actually remain very difficult for going through. And yeah, I guess that we need to create like more spaces for this kind of dialogue between the engineers, because like the super smart society, like the society 5.0 actually tries to achieve that balance, right? Like to have like conversations, collaborations between those working in the engineering sectors and also with those working in the humanities. But in reality, we still see some gaps, we still see some imbalance in the execution. So I hope that answer your questions, even though I know it's not. Thank you.
Okay, maybe last chance, one more question before we finish, if you still have. No? You can ask in bahasa. Boleh nanya pakai bahasa Indonesia, because Bu Riela.
Boleh pakai bahasa Jepang juga boleh, Pak.
Bu Riela studied in Bandung. Boleh pakai bahasa Indonesia? Maybe. It's okay. Okay, no question? Okay. So, if there is no question, I would like to close the session. Maybe before that, we can take picture first. I would like, as a moderator, I would like to thank you for your participation, especially Bu Riela for your time and effort as a resource person for this session, and to the student here for come in the class and also in the Zoom. Maybe we can take picture, and then before that maybe I would like to give the certificate to Ibu Riela, but maybe through email, and this is like the formality. I will show the certificate for Ibu Riela. Mas Ari boleh ditayangin sertifikatnya? I will send it the email to you. And okay. Yeah, maybe let's come to the front and let's take picture with Bu Riela on the screen, please. Ayo ke depan, boleh. Atau biasanya fotonya ke depan nggak? Nggak. Gini aja. Oh, kita yang di sini. Oke. Oke. Mungkin yang dosen boleh maju ke depan, Mbak Ike dan Mas Adit. Semuanya. Oke, boleh mungkin agak merapat kita foto. Oke, sertifikatnya udah Mas Adi? Ada? Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, the certificate, I will send it to you, Bu Riela. Thank you for the participation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So can I leave the room now?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Terima kasih.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
dadah.